Hello, welcome to the Opinionistics. I'm your host, John Maloney, and we'll potentially have co-hosts. If not, then let's go with the flow. Introducing from Prince George, British Columbia, Joe McKay.
Well, good afternoon, and thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Anytime. So, what do you do?
That's an interesting question. So, day job is I run an economic development agency for all of northern BC. So, what that means is we're a public institution. We provide funding for projects that make communities more attractive places to live. And we serve a geography that is only really the northern half of one province in Canada, but the northern half of one province in Canada is about the size of France. So it's a large geography, but sparsely populated. So that's my day job. And then evenings, write fiction wherever I possibly can. And I sit on a couple of different boards. And I'm also obviously a father and a husband. And I live in an old house that needs constant repair. So I could call that a job too.
All right then, sounds good. And what made you start getting into that?
Into economic development?
Yeah.
Well, I was a journalist in Vancouver for a number of years. That was what I did my undergraduate degree in. My specialty or focus when I was a journalist was heavy industry. So mining, forestry, oil and gas, land claim issues in British Columbia and Canada. But I covered those issues worldwide. So I covered especially the mining industry globally, looking at everything from, diamond and platinum and rare earth element mining in Africa and parts of Asia and Eastern Europe to activity for copper, gold, silver throughout South and Central and North America. And that led to a deep appreciation for rural places and the challenges that they face. I'm a city boy. I was born and raised in Vancouver, but I started traveling into rural British Columbia and fell in love with it. And the issues there that I was very familiar with in my day job, and eventually just decided to move my life up here and make a go of it. And I got a job with the Economic Development Agency here in the North and was fortunate to become CEO of that agency about 6 years ago. And been here ever since, never looked back.
All right then, sounds good. And what about your work as a fictional writer?
Well, that's completely different. So I'm a genre fiction writer by trade. So my passion is pulp horror, sword and sorcery fantasy, a little bit of speculative science fiction, particularly short fiction, but also now starting to stretch out into longer pieces as well. I've been writing since I was 12. So it's always been something I've wanted to do. But between university and having a young career through my 20s and early 30s and then children, I only really got back to writing fiction a couple of years ago. So I've only really been pushing hard into it in the last year and a bit, and have been fortunate to see some success with some short stories published with different publishers, and then my novella, which was published this past June. So it's definitely not a thing yet where it's going to replace my income from my day job, but it is definitely at the same time a hobby that is quickly growing and becoming more and more a part of my life.
All right then, fabulous. So, what kind of fiction novels do you write?
Well, in terms of the novella, it's horror. So it's a horror comedy. That's the one that's currently published. It's a story about a Thanksgiving dinner that goes horribly sideways with a dysfunctional family. And then about just as the dinner collapses, werewolves show up unexpectedly and start ripping the dinner party apart. And the balance of the story is about them trying to survive the night. It's very much a story about an everyday family making that transition between first world problems and actual problems that are life threatening and coming together around that. And that was its intention. It's fun. It's funny. It doesn't take itself too seriously. There's no great surprises in it. It's one of those things that if you like campy B horror, then this is probably the book for you. And it was a lot of fun to write. So, my fiction tends to trend toward that genre, but also a lot of humor in it, and dryness or dry wit, if you will, which I think is either part of the Canadian persona, but it certainly is part of mine.
Fabulous. Glad to hear it. What's your favorite thing about the area that you live in?
The outdoors, the four seasons, the fact that you can get anywhere in 10 minutes. I think where I live, it's a part of the world that is stunning, that I think people from other parts of the world would, if they knew what it looked like here, they would very quickly try and find a way to move here. But it's one of those areas that, when you think of middle and northern Canada, has a reputation of being, cold and wintry. And there's no question we get winter. It's 4 or 5 months long. But we get full four seasons. We get up to 30 plus degree temperatures here in the summer, beautiful lakes. You often have lakes to yourself when you're out in the north, and it's truly an unspoiled wilderness, and the people are very, very kind. So for me, it's a long way from gigantic cities and major urban centers, and I suppose that's exactly what I was looking for, and I found it. And so that, for me, it becomes a very comfortable place to call home, a good place to raise a family, and easy, to drive 5 or 10 minutes, and suddenly you're out in endless wilderness that's yours to explore. So that's, I feel extraordinarily blessed to live in this place, as many people do. And it's almost like a luxury to have that right at our doorstep here. And so, and it's funny too, because, growing up in the city in Vancouver, my younger self, if you'd asked me, would you have ever, moved up north? I would have said, not on your life. I would have told you something about me being forever in the city or major cities. And somehow as I grew up, through my early to mid to late 20s was when the switch happened. So yeah, I think that kind of answers the question.
Okay, I like it. And are there any more novellas you're planning on releasing at any point?
Well, right now I've got a sword and sorcery fantasy novel that I'm just starting edits on. So it's fully written. It's in first draft form. So with that one, I hope to have that into second draft form, and then be out to publishers early next year. And then I also have another novel that I'm currently about halfway through, which is a science fiction time travel detective noir kind of piece. In terms of horror novellas, will I come back to the werewolves and the family that experienced what they experienced? I may. I have a couple of ideas kicking around in my head, but the focus right now is to get these couple of projects done and out the door, and see if I can find places for them, and then maybe I'll come back to the horror novella concept in a year or two.
All right then, sounds good. So throughout your whole life, what have been the highs and lows?
Of everything? Do you mean highs and lows of like my life broadly, or about my writing career?
Broadly.
Yeah, I mean, highs and lows. I mean, lows are, growing up in a tough household that was low income, what they used to call a broken home as a kid. It was a challenging environment. There was highs and lows in that though too, moments that were amazing, and moments that, I wouldn't wish on really anybody. I was divorced in my 20s. That was a tough period of time, but it also allowed me to recalibrate and figure out where I wanted to go. The highest highs, as any parent will tell you, is, the arrival of your children, watching them, start to grow up. Mine are still pretty young, but, every day with them. Some of the things I've been able to do in my career, there's very few people, I think, that, at least in this country, are able to take over a $250 million corporation when they're 31 and then grow it to where it is today. I feel very privileged to have had that opportunity. And then, some of the recognition I'd had for my work as a journalist in public relations, and then as a CEO for sure. So I think, like most people, and probably yourself, if I was asked to ask you the same question, right? It's a mix of highs and lows that happen at different times in your life, and interspersed in all of that is kind of a continuity that weaves it all together and makes it feel like a bit of a story over time. Hopefully, there'll be more interesting stuff to come. I'm still pretty young.
Very bold. I like it. I love it. So, what was? I think you already said that. What else? Oh yeah, what's your favorite ice cream topping?
Probably walnuts, I'd have to say. What about you? What's yours?
Well, to be honest, I'm not too keen on a specific type of topping. I do like a bit of sprinkles and chocolate syrup, and I do like a bit of mint every now and then, and something like chocolate button on top, and yeah, that's just at the top of my head. That's all I can think of.
Are you more interested in the flavor of the ice cream or the topping?
The flavor of the ice cream.
Yeah. Okay. So let's get into that quickly here. What would you say are your top 3 flavors?
I'd say it's between vanilla, cookie dough, and mint. That's
Nice.
my 3 favorites.
Yeah, I would say for me it's vanilla, chocolate chip mint, and tiger.
Very nice. So if you were to travel, well, actually, would you rather travel 500 years into the past or 500 years into the future?
The past. I don't want to know what happens. I think the curse of knowing your own future is or what happens to your children or their children would be too much to bear for anybody who has their sanity. I mean, if you really think about that, if you travel 500 years into the future and you're able to look back on all the things that happened, then what are the horrible things that happened to your descendants that you could do nothing about, that they had to go through, that that changed them, that created tragedy in that family line? I think the bliss is in not knowing, right? And so
Yeah.
for me, like I want to go into the past. I want to explore that, and not only because I've always been fascinated with history, which is true, but I think there's mystery in the past that always calls people. And so it's funny, like if you look at time travel stories, be they movies, books, or whatever, very rarely will a story spend much time in the future. And when it does, it's often bleak. The most interesting stuff is when they go into the past. That's what really gets the audience. And if you like, a good example of that is Back to the Future. There's 3 movies there, and they spend of the three movies, you've got close to 6 hours running time, and they spend a grand total of maybe 20 minutes of screen time in the future, and it's bleak as all hell. And the rest of it is spent in either the present time or the past, and that's what seems to be of most interest to the audience. How about you? What would you do? Because you might be on a completely different, plane of interpretation than me on this one.
Oh, my mind has gone completely blank right now. To be honest, I just do whatever, because even though if I go into the past, I could be like the hierarchy, the smart guy, but also the kind that depending that I'll be accused of witchcraft, rather. That's one thing. But in terms of the future, well, we never might know what the future might hold. It may as well be the same as right now. So that's a bit of a letdown.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I actually don't mind which way it goes, because either way, it's still not going to be as good as we all hoped it could be.
No, it isn't, is it? And I suppose if you had power the power to do both and experience both, my guess is that you would probably eventually find yourself saying, you know what, my own time, my own present is probably where I want to be, just simply because that's where I know everybody, that's where I come from. I think that comfort with home probably would transcend time too, but that's a huge guess on my part.
Yep, absolutely. Where was the most beautiful place you've ever been to?
Um, oh, that's hard to say. I would say, there's a couple that are stunning. One would be Haida Gwaii, which is an archipelago off the north coast of British Columbia. It's considered the Galapagos of North America. It's absolutely stunning. Another would be the west side of Vancouver Island. Tofino is absolutely stunning. The Canadian Rockies would be another place that really leaps out at me as there's power in that place. Moab in southern Utah, and Arches National Park. It's got it's hard to pick one, right?
Yeah, it's just so many choices to choose from.
Yeah, you start thinking about it. How about you?
Dang it happens every time. My mind always goes blank.
Well, pick one place then. Maybe not the most beautiful place, just one, just instantly. First place that comes to mind when I say beautiful place you've been to.
Well, I think the last time I remember somewhere very tropical is, well, between Hvar in Croatia and just recently, last summer, going to Brazil, visit my family. There was a resort in Recife that was great, and that was that little town with all the old wacky cowboy kind of stuff, and it's it's a bit out there, that little town. It's incredible, and yeah, that's top of my head. It's a lot of things to go through.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it sounds like both were good experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. This is coming out of nowhere, but what do you think about sending mail to Bigfoot?
What do I think about sending mail to Bigfoot?
Yeah.
Well, I think you need an address first. So, I mean, that would be your first, problem. And then you got to assume that he knows how to read. But let's say that he has a postal code and he knows how to read and he accepts letters like Santa Claus. Then your next question is, what do you write to ask him? Right? What do you want to know from Bigfoot? If he's like a known quantity like Santa Claus, you could write a letter to him or her. What do you want to know? And that's an open-ended question. I don't know what would be of interest. How has he managed to stay secret for so long would be an obvious question. How is it that he now has a postal code but nobody's ever actually seen him? Right? Does he live with Santa Claus? Is he in the North Pole? I mean, I don't know, right? These are the types of things that would sort of tumble through your mind.
Absolutely. If you were to get rid of a holiday, which one would you get rid of?
Oh, what are the holidays that don't make a lot of sense? I don't know. It's kind of hard in Canada here because they all kind of have a particular significance to them. I'm not a religious person, so I would say, Easter is not something that is particularly important to me, but it is important to billions of people around the world. So, I would never take it upon myself to get rid of it with a magic wand because it would impact so many other people, and it's a truly meaningful holiday. But for me in my own life, being raised agnostic, Easter is not something that figures large in my life. But it's nice to have the break in April. There's no question about it. And like I say, it's important to others. Labor Day is one that, is important to recognize the labor movement and what it's accomplished over the last, 100 years for workers. But always seems to get squished right at the beginning of the year. And if you're a parent trying to get your kids off to school, that becomes a really tough and stressful week. And so, maybe I wouldn't get rid of Labor Day. Maybe I'd move Labor Day to a time where it could be recognized and, more fully. It's kind of hard, right? Like, what do you get rid of? Like, do you get rid of like Canada Day? Well, you're not going to do that. You're going to lose your citizenship. You're not going to get rid of Christmas. Thanksgiving's pretty important. So it's maybe New Year's Day. Now that I think of it, I'd have to say New Year's Day. I mean, let's peel that one back. I mean, why is it even a holiday? I mean, so it happens every year. My birthday's not a holiday. That happens every year. It's just a clock turning over, right? Like, why do we have that day off? Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So maybe now that I talked this one out, I'd say New Year's Day is probably going to be number one on my hit list of holidays to get rid of. I personally would be fine going to work on January 1st, hungover or otherwise. How about you?
Well, to be honest, and I know, especially on this occasion, depending on when people are listening to this, I'm not too keen on Halloween. I understand why people would celebrate it, but it's not the kind of celebration I kind of dig. Like, yeah, I'm all right with it. I don't have anything against it. It's not my vibe. That's all it is.
Yeah, my wife is the same way. Halloween is not her favorite. Her favorite is Easter. So Easter becomes very important in our house, just simply because that's her thing. Halloween is my thing. But the good news with Halloween is that at least I don't think anywhere, but at least in Canada, it's not actually a holiday. It's just another day. And so, I'm cool with that. I don't think it needs to be a holiday. It's, just another day where you go trick-or-treating and watch scary movies and do the thing, or you can ignore it entirely, depending on, who you are and what your lifestyle is. And I think that's probably the more important thing. Is not everybody needs to subscribe to all of the various holidays that occur throughout the year, because everybody comes from different cultural backgrounds, right? And you and I are talking probably from a relatively Anglo-Saxon viewpoint of the various holidays that occur in any given year, but there are so many that are not part of our culture that we don't recognize either. So I think the freedom within it is probably the more important piece, to recognize and celebrate those things that are meaningful to you, and be respectful, but move right on past those things that aren't.
Yeah, I could certainly see that. That's why I need to take time to look at it. And I could see that for sure. What could you give a 40-minute presentation on without any preparation?
My organization. It'd be, I do it frequently as part of my job, where I've got to stand up and give an update on who we are and what we do for 10 or 15 minutes. And so I can do that pretty well without any preparation. Beyond that, I don't know. I suppose I could talk about my fiction and drone on for 10 or 15 minutes without a problem. And I could talk about my family, but that would be it. How about yourself?
To be honest, there's a lot of things going on in my head, so I can make a presentation on whatever comes to my head and just explain why that is the case, how I came up with it, and what's about to come next, and how you could predict what I'm going to think of next, and so on and so forth.
What would you say is your ideal topic then? If somebody would say, okay, you got 15 minutes, you can speak about whatever you want, but pick the thing that you really want to talk about, what would that thing be?
I don't have like a certain thing to actually talk about. I go rambling on about a lot of things, so I just do what goes with the flow.
Fair enough.
So 1 minute I could be talking about door hinges, the next minute I could talk about tarmac, then another minute why the sky is blue, and then so on and so forth. I can go on about social media and then back and forth about a new project I've been working on with a couple lads in America, and then a couple more minutes about the tragic love life that I went through back in high school. There's a lot. There's a lot I can talk about.
Well, it sounds like I should be interviewing you, not the other way around.
It seems so. And that is all we have for this episode. It was great having you here, Joel, talking about your work as a economics professor, your work as a fiction novella artist, and everything else. It's been amazing.
Well, thanks so much for having me. It was a pleasure to talk to you, and have a fantastic week, if not a certainly enjoyable Halloween.
You too. And until next time, stay opinionated.